Hello, everybody, and welcome. This is One Day Today. This is episode 112. So good to be with you all. You know, I was just talking backstage with Matthew and our guest Kim today, and we started this in April 2020, right after the pandemic began. And in a moment, I'm going to have Matthew share an image, but one thing I'm discovering in my life, and in how I wound up here, and what I've I grew up very much feeling like different. My story was I don't belong. I just always felt different. I was ethnically and culturally different. I was always I was bullied for being overweight, and it was just like my explanation for that was I don't belong. Like it must be true. And and it was it was a poem that I read in college written by Bob Dylan, that made me willing to look outside of like the keyhole how I saw the world. Like how I saw myself in the world was like through this little keyhole, and it's like, yep, that's who I am, and that's what the world is. And like when I read this poem, it was like my understanding of who I am. I was willing to look outside of my frame of what I knew based on the things that happened to me and all the stories and meaning I made about the things that happened to me. And Matthew, if you could share the meme. One thing that I discovered, it's like, if Bob Dylan wrote a song or a poem that said, you need to find God, you need to find yourself. I never would have found God or found myself. But the fact is, caterpillars don't speak butterfly. We could be a butterfly and just shout at the caterpillar and say, hey, you need to change, you need to transform, you need to stop being this and start being like that. And I would say probably 999 or 1,000 out of 1,000 people would just like, okay, thank you for letting me know. Like, what am I supposed to do about that information? And ultimately, it's the beauty of a butterfly, being a butterfly. Just what it is fully is that allows us to see that there's a way for us to overcome what we're dealing with. If we're afraid of flying, we're never going to try. We're never going to jump off that cliff. We're afraid that we're going to hit the ground, and it's our survival's at stake. And in reality, not only is when we're at that bottom of the valley, when I've been the most afraid, lost, scared, and felt alone, it felt like there was no way out. And it was like really going through those things that I was afraid of that allowed me to get out of the valley. And that's kind of something that we hold at One Day, is that we all have a unique genius, a unique gift a wisdom that we discover on the other side of our trauma. And what I've discovered, and what we are creating in this space is, what we've overcome in our lives and the wisdom we discovered on the other side of our trauma. If we choose to be, it can be a bridge over somebody else's valley. And that's why we're here. We want to invite you, no matter who you are, what color you are, what creed you are, what you believe or don't believe, you have something unique that can lift us all up. And I would assert every single person on this planet, this is the case. So before I welcome our guest, Kim, which I'm very excited to have, let me welcome our co-host, Matthew, all the way in Hawaii, which looks sunny and beautiful as usual. Very
As
surprised.
always, right? Yeah, shocking.
How you doing today, brother?
Doing good, man. Actually, been thinking and reflecting and meditating along the exact same lines you have over the last week or so. And every week we have a check-in at our house, where basically it's just a chance for all the roommates to come together and just share how they're feeling, what's been going on with them throughout the week, and really like get clear on where we're at with each other and what we're looking to achieve as a family. Um, and in this past check-in this week, like the question came up. They asked me like, "Why do you want to be a dad?" Like they already look at me as the dad, which is I find hilarious. But like they're like, "What? Like, why do you want to be a dad?" Was the question. And you know, I've thought about that off and on a lot over the years, but I've never really put much thought into it because there hasn't been a woman that I've been with that I actually feel like would be a really wonderful partner to raise kids with. Like that hasn't come up yet. Um, And so I had to sit with it for a little bit. And what eventually came was I would love to be able to intentionally bring a child into this world and do my utmost best to raise them without indoctrination and have the benefit of being able to springboard off of all my experiences. And that's exactly what you're talking about with, being the bridge over someone else's valley. Is, I've been through so much in my life. Like, I have been in the dumps, I've been in violence, I've been abused, I've been depressed, I've been everywhere. And like, if I can provide all of that knowledge, and not in a way that tells them this is what they have to do to get out of these things, but that this is how I did it, and like give them the opportunity to learn from my experiences. I would love to see what that child can create in this world, like springboarding off of where I'm at, right? And that's a part of what we're doing here too. Like, that's almost exactly what we're doing here. Like, we are creating leaders that can springboard off our cumulative experience and can go out into the world and create something new and innovative and imaginative that we would have thought of, because we're still stuck in our own indoctrination. But they have a totally different realm of possibilities that they think of that we could never imagine. Like, they're just not us. They're like, and so, yeah, like that's kind of where I've been at, is like just really like appreciating the possibilities in what we're doing here.
Mm, I love that, and I love, that like brings it full circle with, you know bringing a child into the world. And but it reminds me of the I don't remember, I'm gonna paraphrase it here, but there's an Einstein quote, basically like the problems of the future or the problems of the past can't be solved with the same thinking that got us into those problems. And it's like, I think that's exactly what you're speaking to. It's, more of the old, you can reshape everything the way, but it's still gonna be the same substance. You can reshape and rekindle and put a bow on all the lies or toxic conversations that we've built our civilization on. And it's still going to be the same, come from that same fear-based paradigm. And that's what, yeah, that's what this is about, is what's possible when we aren't limited to the egoic survival thinking that got us into the mess in the first place. And it's not even bad that we've gone through it, but we need to, this is our opportunity to learn that as time it goes on, that we don't have to be limited to these old conversations.
Exactly. Like, it's not that I get caught up in like, everyone uses the word should, like this shouldn't have happened, or it should have been different, or it should, like, because they see what happened in the past as a bad thing. And I don't see it that way. It's not good or bad. It just happened. And we can't change it. It's already done. It's already in the past. There's no point, like, to me, there's no point in using the word should at all. Not in that context, anyways. For me, it's much more about, okay, that happened. I can't change it, but what can I learn from it? How can I create a more loving world from this moment on, based on what has happened in the past? And so it's very much like taking away that lens of judgment on the past and saying that anything is good or bad that happened in the past. It's not. It happened. Question is, what are we going to do with it now?
Absolutely. Yeah, it's creating, we can create with you know with our we can create with the color being colored and shaped by what the past has limited our thinking, or we can create from a blank canvas. And that's that's a choice. And it's like, and I think it requires cleaning up our side of the street. And I think we're all, it's easy to blame outside of ourselves. And I mean, I do this as much as the next person, and I think we're all guilty at some point in our lives to say, like, why are things this way? And I think that's part of the human experience. But it's when we do take responsibility for our experience, we're able to clean up our side of the street and create anew and, go places we've never gone before. And I think this is a good opportunity now to welcome today's guest. Very excited to have her. Please welcome to the stage Kim Del Val Walker. Is it pronounced Val? I wasn't actually sure. Is it Val or Valet?
It's actually Del Valle.
Del Valle.
Del Valle.
That's even better.
Yeah,
That's even better.
yeah. So it actually translates to Kim of the Valley Walker.
Ooh,
I know, right?
I like it.
I do
Well,
too.
welcome, Kim
Thank
of the
you.
Valley Walker.
Yeah. That's one of the things I wanted to talk about, and it's interesting talking about my last name because I'm an adoptee. And when you guys were both sharing, I was thinking to myself about you, Abram, talking about feeling different, and you, Matthew, talking about some of the different things that you had gone through. And as an adoptee, I always felt like I didn't belong. I always wanted to look like somebody. I always wanted to identify with someone. I felt like quite the outcast, that kind of thing. I felt abandoned. And of course, as a teenager, I chose boyfriends and things that would emotionally abandon me because God forbid if you liked me, I'd push you away because what's wrong with you? My self-talk was like, you're a worthless piece of shit. So I grew up with that kind of trauma and, abuse of all kinds. And there was the neglect piece of that too. And a lot of people, I think, don't view neglect so much as an abusive characteristic or trait that influences them, but it does. And interestingly enough, I found my birth father in 2003, and he asked me to take the family name Del Valle. And then last December, we found out through doing 23andMe that his dad was not his dad. So now we discovered we're not really Del Valles. We think we're either Maderos or Zerone. I'm not sure how to pronounce that, but the whole thing is kind of interesting. So let's see. Going off from that, when I was listening to you guys share, I was thinking about the hero's journey. And I was thinking about how these things come up in our life and we can stay stuck there, or we can ask ourselves, what has this made possible? So yes, you may have had a traumatic childhood. Yes, you weren't responsible for the things that happened to you before the age of 18. But now that you're over the age of 18, what the hell are you going to do about it? And I guess the thing for me that I look at a lot of these things is what are the patterns of behavior that are still rearing their ugly heads, so to speak, in our relationships with other people, in our work environment. I live in Wisconsin, and we're known as Wisconsin nice or Midwest nice. And I think about that, and what it really is codependency. And there's a lot of codependency because I don't want to hurt so-and-so's feelings, or I don't want to make them feel bad. And I think to myself, that's really coming from a place of ego. That's really living from the outside in rather than the inside out. When we're living from the outside in, we're looking to get a certain reaction, a response. We should on ourselves. Talking about shoulding. Don't should on yourself. You wouldn't should on someone else. Don't should on yourself. And if you think about that, a lot of times people are basing what they say or don't say, what they do or don't do, on something outside of themselves, on what they think somebody's response is going to be, or how that person is going to react. And then they mold who they are and what they do based on that. That's what I'm talking about, abandonment. When I think about my adoption, what I did too is I abandoned myself. And I talked about picking wrong boyfriends and ones that would emotionally abandon me as well. And then in January of 1987, I was in a drunken blackout and came out of my blackout in a jail cell. And once I had my first appearance before the judge, found out that I had beat up my mother for trying to take away my car keys. And I beat her up so bad that I broke her hip and I broke her jaw. And I wrote a book about my first 90 days getting clean and sober. But that was another huge turning point in my life. You know, there's lots of times when we're on the precipice of something and we have that path that Robert Frost talks about, taking the one that was less traveled and that made all the difference. When we're standing on that precipice, we have the opportunity to make a choice to become a victim of the circumstances that we went through, or ask ourselves, what has this taught me? What has this made possible? What have I learned from this experience? And to really go within so that you can learn to be more happy outwardly despite whatever is going on. It doesn't really matter what's going on when you feel good within yourself and you can discover what your intrinsic characteristics are. So getting into recovery, I'm coming up on 35 years, February 5th. And that helped me get the drugs and alcohol out of the way. But then there was the underlying codependency and adult child issues. And then I recognized and realized, like, holy shit, I have process addictions. You know, I'm eating food to stuff my feelings. I'm smoking cigarettes to stuff my feelings. I'm drinking coffee to stuff my feelings. I'm rearranging furniture. I'm working buku hours because I'm living from the outside in instead of inside out because I'm trying to get some kind of approval or some kind of validation that I'm a hard worker, this, that, because all these things were not within me. I didn't know that they were there. And then that underlying feeling of abandonment. And then I got Lyme's disease. So I got clean and sober. I was a stay-at-home mom, raised 4 kids. My husband was injured. I wanted to go back to school to become a counselor. I finally did that in bits and pieces in between kids. And my husband finally got my degree, finally was a licensed counselor. And I was going to like change the world, right? And then I recognized and realized all the red tape. You know, it would be my clinical diagnosis based on criteria, what a person needed, but I had an insurance company telling me, no, I know you're saying that this person needs 21 days, but we're going to give you 3. And every 3rd day you had to update these insurance companies. So I was spending more time on the phone with insurance companies trying to get people treatment than I was actually providing treatment. And it was pretty frustrating. I tried inpatient. I loved outpatient. The best job I ever had that I loved was working and living on a reservation. And it's one of those things that happened when I was assigned by the chair of my major, of my program, to go 2.5 hours away one way to go work on this reservation as an unpaid intern 5 days a week. And I thought, how the hell am I going to do this? And I actually went into her office and I said, Gail, are you just being a bitch or what? And she said, no, we need somebody that's familiar with heroin addiction and methadone, and you're the only person qualified to do that. And so begrudgingly I went. I did my internship for 6 months, and it was the best thing that ever happened in my life. I ended up running into somebody that I knew. I had some weird serendipitous stuff that came to fruition. I had been given an eagle feather when I was 17 years old by this man named Harold Frog. And like the first week that I went up there, I went to go to an AA meeting at a place called Undying. And there was this portrait of this chief in full war bonnet headdress with a woman. And I said, oh my gosh, who is that? And they said, that's Harold Frog and his wife, Jane. And I was like, oh, he gave me my first eagle feather, which at the time that I was given this eagle feather, I had no idea what an honor it was. And then kind of word got around like Harold Frog gave her an eagle feather, you know, that kind of thing. And I was kind of accepted. And at the time, I knew that I was Mexican, even though I passed for a white girl. But I didn't know how I knew some of these things. It was almost like in my blood, in my veins, but I loved working there. And then when my 6 months was up, they asked me to come back. And I'm like, I live 2.5 hours one way. And then they said, well, how about part-time? And I agreed to part-time because I loved it so much. And, you know, it was a month later, ended up being full-time. And I was living up on the res and then coming home on weekends. And what that did working there was it kind of ruined me to come back into Western type of medicine is because I could begin a session with someone with a smudging, or we could go have a session outside and earth on the ground. We could sit and listen for the ancestors. We could pull in elders and talk to elders. It would be suggested to go to lodge. I mean, there were different things that I was able to incorporate. And now that, going back with my spirituality, excuse me, when I was a little girl, I had an Aunt Elsie. And she was like one of these people that I just loved. And she took me under her wing and she did this thing called automatic writing, where she would go into like a trance and have seances at her house and do this kind of stuff. And I was just fascinated by it all. And she used to, instead of playing war with the deck of cards like a lot of kids do when they're little, she played, is it red or is it black? Is it red or is it black? And she would have me guess what the cards were. Then we graduated to stars and triangles and circles and squares and that type of thing. And I had always been into metaphysics or ESP, or, you know, like I remember when I was 12 years old sitting downstairs trying to bend a spoon with my mind. But I always had like these intrinsic kind of things that had happened to me, that I knew things, I saw things that other people didn't see. And I was fortunate enough to grow up with a mom that didn't shame me for that. And so when I worked at the reservation, it was kind of interesting. It was like this melding of this stuff. And another interesting thing that happened when I met my grandmother for the first time in 2003, we were standing in line at a pizza restaurant in Chicago across from Wrigley Field. And she grabbed my palm and she said, "Let me see your palm, sweetheart." And I go, "Oh, you read palms?" And she said, "Oh, you come from a long line of medicine women." And I looked at her and I said, "Wait till you get to know me. That's going to make a lot of sense." So I've kind of always had this thing, but then I grew up Catholic. I went on a religious quest. I studied with some Jehovah Witnesses. I bought a world religion book talking about kids. I tried to open up all possibilities to them and allow them to kind of find what worked for them. And I'm kind of an amalgamation of, or culmination of a bunch of these different things. So when I was working at the reservation then, and I left to come back to Western medicine, I really struggled. And I decided to do contract work where I worked on a recovery court team, which was just amazing. And I did that for 3 years too. But during that time, what had happened is I was bit by a wood tick and I didn't know that I had Lyme disease. So apparently I was bit in April, little tiny, just tiny, tiny ticks. Like you can put them on, because I've found other ones, on a dime. And they're even tiny on a dime. And I had this spot on the back of my leg. And there's other stuff like near-death experiences and bit by a brown recluse, other stuff. But this Lyme's disease, I didn't realize what it was. I thought maybe I was bit by another spider. And I went to the doctor and I took I can't think of what it's called right now, but the regimen for Lyme's disease. And I actually felt pretty good. But then during that time, our youngest daughter was pregnant with our first grandchild. And all of a sudden she started bleeding. And then she had to have this life flight to Rochester, Minnesota. And it was like, out of nowhere, it was like my Lyme's disease came back like it was on steroids. And I've had enough experience where I can look back at my life and say, okay, I learned this because of this, and I became this person because of that. But it was always about going within and working on myself. Sorry, my dogs are like pouncing through the door. Can you close that door for me, please? Thank you. Oh, well. There's still 2 dogs in here. Anyway, so I got this Lyme's disease, and all of a sudden I started experiencing neuropathy in both of my feet. I needed I'd had knee surgeries. I was a gymnast. I hung out with the boys when I was young, motocross, snowmobile, water ski, downhill skiing, did all that kind of stuff, and just basically beat the crap out of my body. And I got this Lyme's disease, and my knees got worse, and I got this neuropathy, and I had it in my hands. And I got to the point where I would sit in meditation and I would say, please tell me what to do to heal myself. And all I would hear was, healer, heal thyself. And it got to the point sometimes where I would say out loud, like, F you, what do you think I'm trying to do? I'm trying to heal myself. Tell me what to do. And it was like when I finally gave up, when I finally realized that it wasn't up to me to try to find something outside of myself, that I just needed to be. And I was always one of these people that always wanted to write a book. I was working 60 hours a week. I loved what I was doing. I was there above and beyond for people to the point where, I felt like my cup was being siphoned at times, but I didn't want to let people down. And what Lyme's disease did was it knocked me on my ass for like 3.5 years. Like I just came out of this recently. And I was only able to work 1 day a week. I worked on Wednesdays. And I needed all day Tuesday to like prepare. And then I needed Thursday to recover and recoup. And then when they wanted me to renew my contract for a 4th year, I struggled with this. And I thought, I grabbed a green stone and I put the stone on my heart chakra. And I said, I'm scared. I don't know what to do. Because after my husband became disabled, I was the breadwinner. And in my heart, I felt like I can't do this anymore. And I wrote a letter of resignation. And as soon as I wrote that letter of resignation, I felt like this huge weight. So in the Lyme's disease, I had to say no to people. My doctor finally diagnosed me with, I can't think of what it's called. Brain fog is one of the things, by the way, just saying. I don't know. But I'm pretty good now, other than some brain fog, but that could just be brain fog. Anyway, I had no choice but to have to tell people no. And I had no choice but to honor myself because I didn't want to let people down. And I would literally want to do something. I would literally say, yes, I'm going to do this. Yes, I'm going to do that. Yes, I'll be there. And then I'd have to cancel at the last minute because I was so fatigued, so sore, so anguish filled, so sore. All my joints, everything hurt. And then I started learning more about herbology. And then I started writing my book. I bitched about all this working 60 plus hours a week, being there for everybody, being tired, being exhausted. And it was like the universe said, okay, I'm going to knock your ass down and you're going to lay in a bed for 3.5 years. You're going to finish your book. You're going to learn about herbology. You're going to learn about food as medicine, and you're going to heal yourself. And I was fortunate enough that the universe also provided me with working 1 day a week so that I could do that. And then when that wasn't going to happen anymore, I thought, okay, what am I supposed to do? So I went within. I had time actually to meditate every morning. I had time to say, okay, I'm listening. I'm not trying to fix anything. I accept that this is where I'm at right now. Tell me what it is I need to do. And it was start writing. It was start doing readings. So then I pulled my tarot cards out and I started doing tarot card readings again for people that knew that I had done that on the side. And my oldest son said to me, Mom, it's so nice to see you doing what you were always meant to do. And I was like, what? He goes, well, I remember as a kid, in between things, you do tarot card readings for people, but you never did it full time. And then what happened was things started changing and shifting for me. I would start getting all this additional information. I did have a mediumship experience happen years ago and noticed that I started having more mediumship things. And if you don't know what that is, that's communicating with people who've crossed over on the other side. And they give me specifics, and they're so funny sometimes because they give me real mundane, silly things that you wouldn't necessarily think about. Like, I don't know, what's coming to mind right now is the popcorn maker that grandma used to have that reminds you of having popcorn at grandma's house, those kind of things. And sometimes I get names. And then what began to happen was people were telling other people. And my Lyme's disease started going away. And it almost was like the universe told me that here you grew up feeling abandoned. You chose relationships where you would feel abandoned. And the person who abandoned me the most was myself. So it was like being an adoptee gave me that gift. Being a recovering drug addict and alcoholic gave me the gift of being on the precipice to use a different path, to view things differently, to start exploring within instead of feeling like a victim of the circumstances that I went through. And then going back to school to become a counselor, and then recognizing and realizing that I spent more time working with insurance companies than I did patients. Then going to the reservation, and that most wonderful, incredible experience, and feeling I felt part of that. I'm still friends with a bunch of people. We've lost a lot of people, but the elder of that community, his name was Benny Rogers, and he was actually teaching me the language and teaching me different things, and I will just be forever grateful. And then that happened, and then the Lyme's disease forced me to go within as well. And I'm sure that's why in my meditation, all they would tell me was heal thyself, because I was looking for these things outside of myself, and I had to say no. And I had to ask myself, what does this make possible? What does this make possible? And I had to step out in faith and trust and leave that job and not have any idea how the hell, here's basically what I did when I held that stone on my chest and I wrote that letter of resignation. I said, okay, universe, you know that I need a roof over my head. I need internet. I need electricity. And I'd be more than happy to accept chickens for payment. But I know that the power company and the mortgage company won't accept my chickens for payment. So tell me, because I have issues with money too. But that's another story. So help me to be able to do this. And I've been able to do that. And then, like I said, this mediumship thing started happening. So then what I started doing is I would do readings where I would sit down 45 minutes ahead of time and I'd say, tell me what so-and-so needs to know. And I would start writing, and it'd be anywhere like from 1 to 5 pages of stuff. Then I call them at our scheduled time. I go through the writing, I get more information. People can ask questions. They can have family members there on speaker, on the phone. And it's been an amazing, rewarding, fulfilling experience. But what's been happening now is sometimes I sit down to do the channeled writing and I'm getting like this underlying stuff, and spirit will actually tell me like, that's enough. And I'm like, what do you mean that's enough? I got, another 35 minutes before I have to call this person. And so I'm calling somebody cold, or I'll send them a message and say, hey, spirit says we're done. This is what I'm supposed to work with you on. And it's like, there's a guy named Edgar Casey from the 30s and 40s, and he used to go like in a trance, and he would diagnose people and tell people how to heal themselves with physical and medical type conditions. And I almost feel like I'm using my knowledge, skills, and abilities as a counselor but spirit is directing me. I don't even know what to call myself. Actually, I just recently came up with the name of soul coach, because what I've started to do is I've been like downloading this information and then saying, well, it says like spirit is telling me that you still have unresolved issues with your dad because he was an alcoholic and blah, blah, blah. And they're like, yeah. And spirit's telling me like to look at how this is playing out in your relationships now. And it's like you keep interacting with the same person, and spirit's telling me you need to work on loving yourself for this or that so you don't keep meeting the same person in a different pair of shoes. And that's kind of where I'm at now. And you know what? It's been a couple years now since I decided to not renew my contract. And I still have electricity. I still have internet access. And I feel like the work that I'm doing is more important than anything that I've ever done, because I feel like I'm helping other people discover who they are below what they look like on the outside, or what job they wear, or what roles they play, or that kind of thing. Like those intrinsic characteristics, like being honest and trustworthy and caring and kind and gentle and loving and artistic and creative, and all those things that no matter what is going on the outside, nobody can take that away from you.
I love that. There's a lot that I'd actually like to go back and unpack. So I feel like it was time to kind of jump in and like actually start playing with some of these things. One of the biggest themes that I feel like you exemplify, and I'd love to, if you could like kind of dive into it a little bit more. There's a lot of people who say follow your passion, but there's a lot of people who say follow your curiosity. But what you're doing, what I feel is much more it's much more direct, is following your fulfillment, like finding that thing that actually makes you feel fulfilled and following that. And the things like you kind of shared, like this is where I wonder if you start is going back and maybe giving an example or two of the like the abandonment and the self-critical, like the self-judgment and those things. Could you talk a bit about how those got started in your life in the first place? Like, how did specifically this self-judgment, like where did that start and how did that get installed? And then what was something that happened where you started noticing you were doing that? Like, kind of, if you could be specific.
I think that self-judgment started happening because as children, our brains are wired from the inside out. When we are in prenatal up to about age 6, we're having our amygdala, hippocampus, and limbic system created. And when you're told things like, you want to cry, I'll give you something to cry about. Or you're told things like, what the fuck is wrong with you? Or what are you, stupid? When you're given that energy of it's not just the words, it's the tone of voice, it's the words, it's the faces, it's all of that, the angry energy that comes. I think a lot of us become who we are based on what our caretakers tell us. So that happened at an early age. And I think that has to do with early childhood brain development, and the inconsistency in parenting. Like one day everything was okay, but depending on how much mom and dad drank, it might not be okay the next day. So there was a lot of inconsistency. And I'm not saying that there shouldn't be fluidity within parenting. There just wasn't in mine. And so therefore that kind of made me hold back. The thing that made me realize that I had really, when I needed to work on that, was when I got clean and sober in 1987. I had a wonderful sponsor named Betsy, and she talked to me about other things that I was addicted to and how I may not lie outright because I prided myself on being this honest person, but that I would lie by omission. And she pointed out a lot of things to me, and the way that I worked through a lot of that was through journaling. But, I like to write. So I've always liked to write because writing was a safe place for me to get my feelings out where it wasn't safe to do so growing up where I grew up. I grew up in don't talk, don't trust, don't feel. So,
Yeah, I feel like there's this critical gap that happens in the way we are raised in Western, particularly in Western society. And I love that you have that juxtaposition of going back and forth between the more indigenous culture and the Western society, because it really highlights like the lack on both sides. Like neither one is perfect.
no.
But one of the things that I feel like is really lacking on our end is um, we do not teach critical thinking or mindful awareness at all in any shape or form. So we grow up having all of these little things happen, like what you were just talking about the inconsistencies of parents and in parenting and the what are you stupid and all that stuff. But we don't have the tools to separate what is actually us from what is them. That's not something that we get taught. And one of the things, one of the ways I tend to point to it is we grow up constantly being told what others think the world is instead of being invited to discover what it is for ourselves.
Well, that really, growing up like that too, also really affected me as a parent. My oldest son had musical gifts from the get-go, right? And he had pretty much mastered guitar by the time he was 10. And his guitar teacher said, technically, he's better than me, and I don't even know who to send you to. And my son said, that's okay. I want to learn violin. And I'm like, you're a left-handed guitarist. How are you can't play violin left-handed. And 3 weeks later, he was the concert master of the middle school orchestra. And then he went on to become the concert master of the North Shore Symphony. And he was, he was concert master by the time he was, I think he was 15 because we still had to drive in places. He wasn't old enough to drive. And he was getting paid $25 an hour to do this. And my dad was hell bent on, you got to get a real job. He has to get a job as a busboy or a dishwasher. You got to get a real job. You got to do this, you got to do that. And I'm like, no. I remember he was 10 years old and he said to me, Mom, I am music. And I thought, yeah, you are. And I wanted to be a writer. And my dad sent me to real estate school. I didn't want to be a realtor. So it was kind of like taking those leaps of faith. And because that stuff happened to me, I made sure that I never did that to my children. And my son ended up, he did get a busboy job once for, I don't know, maybe it was 3 months, but that was it. But otherwise, he has made music and made a living making music for his entire life. And he's a dad now. And to watch that and to watch, it's really important. When you were talking about being a dad, Matthew, I was thinking to myself, your children will show you who they are. They'll show you what their gifts are. And maybe your job as a parent is just to nurture that, whatever that is. And just guide it. Just guide them along. And my father, I started a magazine once accidentally that went to low risk, I know, low income and at-risk families, called the Family News Network. And my father and I weren't talking for 2.5 years. And then he was diagnosed with chronic lymphatic leukemia, and they gave him a couple years to live. And, here I had wanted to be a writer all these years. And unbeknownst to me, he'd go and he'd pick up my magazine every week. And when we finally reconciled before he died, I found out he had a copy of every magazine that I had put out there. And he also told me that I made the right decision with my oldest son, Gene, and that he was really proud of him. So, I mean, I think the biggest thing for us is to get over our fears. And, you were talking about these different things that kind of led me to that path. I'm a certified infinite possibilities trainer too with Mike Dooley. And I love the analogy he gives. He says, we all have Google Maps for the most part. And what do we do with Google Maps? We put in our destination. Like, I live in northern Wisconsin. If I want to go visit my son in Sarasota, Florida, I put in his address. And I trust that Google is going to get me there. Google's like the universe. If I keep myself out of the way with the hows and whys and trying to figure it out, or, a lot of people, I see people say, oh, I need money. No, you don't need the money. You need this thing that doesn't necessarily involve money. You need the opportunity. It could come from a different way that you don't necessarily know. So if we put in our destination, put our cars and drive and go, what's going to happen is, you're going to be tooling down the road, and then all of a sudden, oh, this person wants a reading. Let me pull over here. And I'm going to meet this person because of that. And that's like a little exit. And you know what? Maybe I'm going to go to that Quick Trip and grab a cup of coffee and use the restroom. And now my Google Maps says that there's an accident and there's a 45-minute delay. So you could take this other way that might be a little faster on these backcountry roads. And lo and behold, you meet this other person. So it's kind of like, for me, I have like these broad brush stroke, if you will, goals. My goal is to make the world a kinder, better, loving place, one person, one group at a time. And basically what I do is I put my car and drive and I see what happens. I mean, I just met Abram the other day on a different group. And then I went and poked around because I sent all these people friend requests and he accepted mine. I poked around on his page and I thought, oh, he did this really cool thing. If I had known about that, I would have shared that with other people. And then he asked me, hey, you want to speak on this thing? And I'm like, I don't know what this thing is, but he said what it was. But I'm like, yeah, okay. Because we have to show up for life. And you remember that movie, Yes Man, with Jim Carrey? He just started saying yes to things. I think sometimes we need to say yes to things and just allow our fear to get out of the way and say yes and see what happens.
It's so powerful. I mean, everything you're sharing, I heard there's so much. I hear your commitment to holding the space for possibility, but also it's like you're like you hold a boundary. It's weird. It's counterintuitive. It's like you have a boundary, but a boundless boundary of who we are. It's like just for what you shared about your son, just that alone, that the fact that you've held the space for him to be himself is like the greatest gift I feel like we can give anybody. And like just your description of, I mean, it's just like just to see someone like that talented and who's that much of a like soul connected to their art, to have a parent like you to be like, just go be you. It just I feel like the way you bring that to everywhere you go, that you hold sacred who everybody is, and you say yes. Like, because I heard you also saying like, to say yes to the universe. There's also knowing when to say no. And
Right.
it's like that's where I see the boundaries, and like you're saying yes to the uncertainty and the chaos around the corner, but you're saying no to what dishonors that who you are.
And that's the thing, whenever we're going to do something, example, like I remember when I was first had my Lyme's disease and I was deteriorating rather quickly. Somebody had asked me to go to this party out in a farm and I was really excited and I wanted to go. And then somebody else, so two people I had made commitments to that I was going to go. And then I knew I couldn't go. And, I used to be one of those people that I had to give a long excuse, like, oh, I can't because of blah, 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 blah. No, I learned from Betsy to just say, no, I can't, or that's not going to work for me, to shorten it up. Because when my ego's involved, I feel like I have to give these long explanations as to why, because I feel responsible for these other people's feelings. That doesn't mean be an asshole. It just means I'm not responsible for other people's feelings. How they perceive something is how they perceive something. It's none of my business. So the important thing when I'm saying yes to something is to ask myself, what is my motive for saying yes? If my motive is to please somebody outside of myself, that's the wrong motive. If the motive is, I don't know, this feels joyful, this feels right. Like saying yes to this felt like, I don't know why I said yes. I don't even know what it is, but I want to do this. It feels right. So it's kind of like going within and checking on yourself and asking if you're still confused, like, what is my motive for doing this? Because it feels good and I want to. Okay, that's good enough. You know?
I love that, and I appreciate you just jumping in, and like, but also it's like when you say yes to what is in the universe in that way you just described, it's like this could have been a complete opposite, and this is like you just showed up and we just started judging you and started, and it's like, and you still could have, it could have been an opposite, but you're coming into it with the way you did, you still would have gotten something, and maybe we would have seen something that you could have shifted the world history just by who you're being in the face of, you know what I mean? Like, it's like, because you bring that no matter what happened,
Yeah. And you know what? Shit happens. And when shit happens now, I recognize and realizing that there's some kind of nugget in there. What does this make possible? That's like COVID. What does this make possible? COVID has made a virtual stage possible. I wouldn't be talking to you in Hawaii right now, or you in Kentucky right now, or me in Wisconsin. COVID made that possible. So it's kind of like there's a lot of blessings in disguise, but sometimes we got to get out of our own shit to be able to see them. So.
Exactly. Like that. Oh, Abram has a phrase that he uses that I absolutely love. It's the collateral beauty. Like the collateral beauty in everything that happens.
Collateral beauty.
Yeah,
I like that.
I've totally stolen it. Like it's like no shame. I'm just stealing it. But it's like we put limits on that, right? Like, oh yeah, there's collateral beauty in everything but this. Like there's collateral beauty in everything but my son dying. There's collateral beauty in everything but a car wreck. There's collateral beauty in everything but, and that's not the reality. Like this goes back to what I was saying at the very, very beginning, like just taking away that idea of whatever happened being good or bad. It just happened. And we can choose to make it good or bad.
Right.
And so there's one other thing that you were talking about that like this kind of comes back to, which I am absolutely blanking on film it, but I was like literally just on the tip of my tongue right before I started talking. The reasons. So like this distinction that between doing something because of a reason or doing something because of a feeling. And like what I have come to is this place where like I don't have a reason for doing anything.
Right?
Yeah, no, they're just not there. The reasons only become apparent in hindsight. And so, like what you were saying, everything that I'm doing, I'm not checking in. I'm not looking for a reason to do it. I'm checking in about how it feels to do it.
Yes.
And if it feels joyous, if it feels expansive, if it feels like an absolute intuitive divine yes, then I do it. No questions asked. There's no like I don't need a reason. And so like I'm like the number one thing that I feel like stopped me, and I feel like this stops a lot of people from trusting that feeling, is fear. Like if you know, I get an intuitive yes to like taking a particular exit and going and talking to this person, but I'm scared that they're going to judge me, or I'm scared, like, then I'm not going to listen to that feeling. I'm going to listen to my fear instead. And so that's where, for me, it becomes this journey of, okay, well, one, what is the source of that fear? Like, where is that fear coming from? Two, and every single time, it has come down to a belief. There's something that I have taken on to be true that I have not looked at, and I'm just operating on an assumption. And so I have to discover that belief that creates the fear. And then I have to ask myself, is that actually a true thing? And inevitably, the answer that comes back is, I don't know.
Oh,
And in the I don't know, like becoming comfortable with the I don't know, that's where it's opened up the possibility of anything's possible. Because I don't know.
well, sometimes it's like we have to ask ourselves, what's the worst thing that could happen? Can I live with that? And other times we have to ask ourselves, but what's the best thing that could happen? And I think sometimes we have a tendency to go to the negative because that's the way our society and culture tends to be, unfortunately.
And that's okay. Like, it's okay to go to the negative. It's just looking at the reality of, okay, so this happened. What next? And recognizing there's always an after. No matter how bad something is, as long as I'm breathing, there is an after. And in that after, there's a possibility to thrive.
Exactly. And it's what does this make possible?
Absolutely. It's, it's seeing the present. It's like it's seeing the uncertain. This reminds me of something that as we're closing, and I want to give you the last thought, Kim. But it's like there's no certain. The only certainty is uncertainty.
Mm-hmm.
Control is an illusion. Based in fear, and I could have the biggest plans in the world, and excitedly or terrified, and the world could get hit by an asteroid, and I could have created that future and been in the depths of joy. And even if it wouldn't come, it's like what we make it. It's about like the Google Maps. It's like we all know where maybe sometimes we do. We know which general direction we're headed,
Right.
somewhat, but it's not. It's an old adage for a reason, but it's like it's not about the destination. It's about the journey. But I think that's an adage for a reason because, we can do any action or any verb with a full array or experience of emotions. I could go on a run and be just angry the whole time and pissed at the world, or I could go on a run where I'm a little kid, frolicking excited at chasing rabbits and
yes.
And it's who we're being with what is and what is what's reality. And it's like, and I feel like this is a saying one of my mentors says is, whipped cream on shit is still shit, and we can't create our lives, and I think we all have been guilty of this at some point in our lives, but we build on top of all the shit that we pile there without even acknowledging. And it's like, yeah, I'm happy, or yeah, it's like, are you okay? It's like, yeah, I'm okay, I'm fine, or it's like kind of like we in trying to survive and protect ourselves and our identities, we swallow and just deal with the pain of how unhappy we are and how unsatisfied and unfulfilled. And I acknowledge you, Kim, for just not even considering. You're like, yep, nope, I'm gonna do me, and I'm gonna be fulfilled, and I'm gonna hold that space for everybody, and to empower others to live that way, and to empower your children to live that way. And it's really inspiring, and I feel good just knowing you're in the world, being you, knowing that some random stranger is gonna come, like having a hard day, is gonna just run into you and be like, "Who's this person?" And then you're gonna like talk to them, and their world's gonna be rocked. They're like, "Wait,
Aww.
what?" really, it means so much for you to share your story with us and your wisdom. And, we'd love for you to come back, share some more stories with us. This has been such a gratifying, just, I love hearing you speak, just like how you connected the dots in your life from the Lyme disease and overcoming, the self judgment and the fear of abandonment, and how now you're in the world, this butterfly, just reminding us all that we all have that choice.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for having me too. That's another reason you just explained why I have to explain to people that I'm a psychic medium soul coach, because I could be a fortune teller, but that is disempowering for people. I could whip out tarot cards and say, yeah, it looks like you should take this job and blah, 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 blah. And this, we can't control other people around us. These people that, oh, is this my soulmate? I don't know. Well, I don't know. Do you want it to be? Have you, I would rather empower people. And so I'm not a fortune teller. I just want to say that. I'm more of a soul coach. And it has been such an honor and such a treat. I had no idea what I was going to say or what was going to come out of me. It was very extemporaneous. And you know what? I really liked it. I loved being able to share with you guys. And I'm so grateful that you could identify with. And just thank you so much for having me on and asking me to be here. It's been an absolute blast and a pleasure. And I appreciate you both so much and wish you all the best.
Thank you, Kim.
Thank you.
Kim Del Valle Walker, or Kim of the Valley, aka Kim of the Valley.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Kim. And thank you all at home for tuning in with us and just joining us. And, I want to take a real quick opportunity to invite you to join us and to share your gift and your genius. What is your journey, and for you to discover the butterfly that you are? What did you have to overcome and face in your life? What valleys did you crawl through as a caterpillar, and what did you discover on the other side of that? That's why we hold this space, is for you to share the gift that you are and the wisdom you've discovered on the other side of, the most difficult periods of your life. And part of our one day mission is bringing you and me and communities together in joyous celebration, unifying humanity in our diversity to create a better world for us all. And that's all part of our one day vision, which is humanity rising in a connected world with each person's unique gifts and genius and contributions being valued and magnified through a higher level of collaboration, producing unprecedented new realms of possibility. Thank you all. Thank you again, Kim. I love you all. Be safe, be well, and we'll see you next week. And one day is today. Bye, everybody.